Hello there everyone, and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios, where we've taken a little bit of time, a little bit of rest to set up the new studio, and we're more or less there. One or two little technical issues that I'm still working on, but hey ho, hopefully that will not ruin the quality of this video. So, as we are on Warhammer Wednesdays, we're going to talk about the Kharadon Overlords again, and this time we're going to be looking at the thing that really makes the Kharadons unique. The thing that gives them quite the advantage over their opponents. The Sky Ships. As their army book is still new enough, I feel relatively confident that I can use the rule aspects in this video as well as giving you a little bit of lore background on each one of these wonderful, wonderful vehicles. As I currently own 2 gun haulers and a frigate, and you never know, one of these days I might add an Ironclad to that mix, but yeah, that's some point in the future. Anywho, shall we begin with the smallest out of all of them, but by far one of the most numerous, the Grund stock gun hauler. This is one of the fastest vessels that the Kharadon Overlords possess, and it is a single buoyancy attack craft which has a wonderful, wonderful cannon strapped to the front of it. This wonderful vessel is used as an escort of sorts. These tend to hang around the frigates and ironclads and essentially prevent foes from getting too close to the larger ships. They are there to dissuade anyone from getting too close. They are very nimble, very fast, surprisingly tough, and more than capable of punching holes through even dragons or other creatures of similar size. You can give them what is known as a sky cannon, my personal favourite because cannons are hilarious, or you can give them what is known as a drill cannon round. Each crewman has a rifle, and they've got their own little club in case someone gets too close, but quite frankly, if someone's in close combat with your gun hauler, then things aren't going very well. And really, you should just drop your little bomb that you can drop, and just get the hell out of there. A gun hauler has a very respectable stat line of a 12-inch move, 7 bravery, 10 wounds, and a 4+ save. A very respectable stat line. Now, the interesting bits come when you choose what weapons it has. As I said, you can choose to have either what is known as a sky cannon or what is known as a drill cannon. The sky cannon has 2 different profiles. The main one being the solid shell shot, which is a 24-inch range, 1 attack, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2 weapon, has a -2 rend and does d6 damage, which is fantastic against, big creatures and the like. Or it has the shorter range variant of the same gun called Shrapnel Shot. 18 inches, d6 attacks, hitting on 3s and wounding on 3s with -1 rend and 2 damage apiece instead. So you can see how, if you get close enough to the enemy, especially if you have 2 of these things, firing shrapnel shots into units, yeah, that's going to make some really unpleasant things just go kaboom. Heck, this is a great way to clear away goblins or any horde type units, for example. And the drill cannon is a longer ranged gun, but it is a single attack, hits on a 3, wounds on a 3, -3 rend, and d3 damage. So against something with a bit more armour, this is quite a decent gun. However, if you take the drill cannon, then you don't have the option between a shrapnel or shell shot, which I personally feel isn't worth the risk. But I have seen this work on more than one occasion for different vessels, so I'm not going to complain. Besides, the drill cannon has got a wonderful special rule, which essentially means that when it hits on a 5+, that attack inflicts 3 mortal wounds on the target. So yeah, there's potential there, for sure. But obviously it's the special rules that really make this thing hilarious. And finally, you've got your Ethershot Carbines, essentially the little gun that's attached to the side of your gun hauler. 12-inch range, 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, -1 rend and 1 damage. Nothing to shout home about, but it's just a little extra firepower just to try and, pepper 1 or 2 other models away. And of course, you've got your boarding weapons. 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, with 1 damage. Yeah, don't get this thing into close combat, it's just not a good idea at all. Unless you intend to drop your bombs and then get the hell out of dodge. Speaking of bombs, the Bom Rack Rule means that at the start of your combat phase you can pick an enemy unit within 1 inch. and you roll a dice. On a 4+, they take D3 mortal wounds. So yeah, that will dissuade a few enemies, but yeah, I would not count on it killing a unit unless that unit is, well, low on wounds and only 1 or 2 models. That's really your best bet, honestly. But it does also have this wonderful ability called Disengage in case you are in combat. This model, and any models in its garrison, can retreat and still shoot in the same turn as long as there are no enemies that can fly within 3 inches of it. A very, very useful ability. Because, yeah, like I said, whilst it does have 10 wounds, you don't want this thing in close combat, you want it to be peppering everyone around it, making sure it fires lots of shots and protects your bigger ships. Because of its ability, the Escort Vessel rule. Roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to a friendly sky vessel, and if your gun-struck gun hauler is within 3 inches of your bigger vessel, then the gun hauler can take the wound instead. On a 6, that wound or mortal wound is completely negated, which, is potentially all kinds of hilarious. And last but by no means least, you have the rules Ahead Full and Fly High. Ahead Full means that once per battle, at the start of your movement phase, you can add 6 inches to this model's movement characteristics, meaning if you want that extra boost of speed, say at the beginning, or if you really want to get the hell out of dodge, then this is a very useful trait. And Fly High is equally fun. Instead of making a normal move, you can choose to say that this model is flying high. If you do so, you remove the model from the board and set it up anywhere within an inch of a terrain feature or objective. However, it does have to remain 9 inches or more away from an enemy model. This is potentially really cheesy rule, especially if you just want to get to objectives quick. You just take all your gun haulers, in fact most of your vessels have this rule, so you can take them off the board and just stick them right next to objectives and go, nah 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 nah. That's very, very frustrating, I'm sure you all agree. But now we move on from our escort vessel, the plucky little gun hauler, and we move on to something far more substantial, the Arcanaut Frigate. The Engineers Guild were very proud of this particular design because it struck the perfect balance between speed, transport and firepower and was a versatile craft in virtually all situations. Whilst not a vessel really used for much transport, it's not a goods vessel like their larger ships known as ether hulks or cloud dredgers, which are typically used for mining and cargo transport. Unless it's an ironclad, frigates carry the biggest and heaviest guns in the Arcanaut fleet. The main gun being mounted on the foredeck in the shape of a turret, which can either be a sky cannon or a harpoon skyhook. Both weapons equally designed for taking down large monsters or dragons, or giants, or anything large really. These ships are particularly good at taking down things far larger than them. Ethershot swivel guns on both of its sides mean that you're not getting past it without getting peppered with something. Grud settler bombs underneath lay waste to anything that gets too close, as well as sky mines, which basically is a middle finger to anything that tries to grapple the ship and get too close. This is the backbone vessel of any true Arcanaut fleet. Though it has been used to haul goods if the situation requires it, these frigates are typically used to hunt down ether gold seams, destroy anything that gets too close to the mining operations, and just generally be an all-purpose vessel. They have been used on more than one occasion as transports for varying troops. Your Arcanaught Admiral, for example, will happily settle on one of these frigates along with his friends and neighbours, to then disembark at the correct times and go and lay waste to anyone silly enough to prevent him from getting his ether gold. The frigate has a wonderful rule set. 14 wounds. When uninjured, a movement of 12 inches with the rules Disengage and High Fly, meaning that, it can just get the hell out of dodge as quickly as it wants and move pretty fast, and, even if it's charged, it can back up and shoot again. It's a very nimble vessel. 8 bravery and a 4-up save means it's pretty tough and won't run in most situations. And like I said, it has 2 different weapons. It has the standard boarding weapons and Ethershot Carbines, although this Ethershot Carbine is 4 shots instead of the 2. But you have your option of a heavy sky cannon or a skyhook. Now the heavy sky cannon is just a souped up version of the sky cannon we talked about for the gun hauler. The shrapnel shot, however, has a 24-inch range in this instance, and the sky cannon has a 30-inch range. However, the profiles otherwise remain the same, the shrapnel being really good for taking down multiple targets, and the sky cannon being a wonderful way to make a dragon think twice about getting too close. The skyhook is an interesting weapon. 24 inches, 1 attack, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, -2 rend and d6 damage. Whilst that's not as impressive as the sky cannon, it does have an interesting rule. You add 2 inches to your charge rolls if this vessel is armed with a heavy skyhook. The idea being that as this vessel charges, it fires the skyhook and, reels the ship in, or reels whatever it's shot in, so you can get close to it. Although, personally, I don't like my ships getting anywhere near the enemy. I like to stay a nice 18-inch distance out of charge range, but, it could be handy if you wanted to disembark your fellows and, cause all kinds of problems. Speaking of which, this is, of course, a vessel that can transport individuals, and this is where the rules get a little bit complex. This model can have up to 15 friendly marine models on board. This basically means Arcanaut companies, characters, and you can also have your flying engine riggers. If this model has 11 or more models garrisoned inside of it, it can no longer use the high fly rule. You also halve its movement characteristics whilst it's this heavily laden, meaning that it's not going to move anywhere that quickly. And if you've already made a fly high movement, you can't have units embark or disembark from it. And any models that are counted as being inside do not count towards objective scoring. In addition to this, an attack made by a weapon that is in range of this model can attack either this model or the garrison inside of it. So it's no surefire way to protect your troops. Whilst in some games you might be lucky and people will just forget that they can shoot at the troops inside of the transport, don't count on it, because it can be really frustrating if you get, your unit shot whilst inside this thing. And if, by some horrible circumstance, the frigate is destroyed with your units inside, you have to roll a dice for every single model. And on a 1, that model is slain. So, there's a bit of a risk-reward going on here. And whilst it has transport capacity for up to 15, you really don't want to do that too much. Really, if you're transporting troops in it, then the best thing to do is to plonk them down relatively quickly so the frigate can get away and start doing what it should be doing. Firing its guns, getting things within range, and just murdering everything in sight. In addition to the disengage and high fly rules, as I've previously mentioned, you also have the Bom Rack Rule, which means it works in the same way as the gun hauler. If someone charges this unit and is within an inch, you drop some bombs, and on a 4+, you do the D3 mortal wounds. But then again, you don't want to get this thing in close combat, so that's kind of a Hail Mary move. But frigates come with ether navigators and their own engine rigger, which means in the hero phase, this unit can heal 1 wound. And you can re-roll run moves for this model. Yeah, that's quite a handy little trait. And if you take various upgrades or artifacts, you can make this thing constantly heal. And if you have engine riggers on board, in addition to the engine rigger that's already there, this thing can be constantly regenerating wounds at a ridiculous pace, meaning it's a very, very tough little vessel. I have one of these in my army, and I love it to bits, although, dear God, I need to finish painting the damn thing, because, that's been on my shelf for far too long. And finally, we have the big daddy of them all, the Arcanaught Ironclad. This really big, bulky, slow and heavy ship is one of the most badass firing platforms the Kharadons can come up with, and it's an amazing vessel. With enough guns, torpedoes, and bombs to render even greater demons into small piles of bubbling goo. Yeah, this is the ship that basically gives the middle finger to anything magical and says, eat some science, yo. It isn't the biggest vessel that the Kharadon overlords possess. Their skyports are, well, flying vessels in and of themselves, and bristling with more guns than could ever be put on these vessels. However, this is by far your best sledgehammer for breaking any nut. They are, however, very costly to build, and typically speaking are never sent out by themselves. At the very least, you send one of these out with a frigate and a full escort of gun haulers, because, yeah, ironclads are a serious investment, and they consume so much ether gold and, well, ammunition and supplies that, you do not want this thing to die, because that's going to be one costly repair bill. A single ironclad usually will be docked in the skyport and there to defend it from anything incoming. It has more than enough hold spaces to store plenty of booty if it decides to go off piracy for whatever reason, with a hold big enough to transport an entire Arcanaut company, as well as admirals, engine riggers, and whatever other characters you want to send along with it, and with its own core of engine riggers to keep it going, as well as a navigator. Yeah, this vessel is fully laden and fully stocked and ready to go. The most destructive tool that it has, however, is the wonderful main gun. Again, you have the same kind of profile, except bigger, because Kharadons like things bigger. The Great Sky Cannon or a Great Sky Hook. Both equally fantastic at killing monsters. I think it's now more than prevalent enough to understand that the Kharadon overlords knew fully well that they were on a bit of an underdog scenario. They knew that typical warfare, as their ancestors used to do, just wasn't going to work, and they needed something far more insanely powerful than what they'd produced in the past. And these vessels, yeah, they more than make up for that ancestral shortcoming. Now that these dwarves are fully capable of realizing their own inventions, and not worry too much if something fails, they can just try again and do it better next time. Yeah, this is why Kharadons have some of the most insane guns that I've ever seen. An Arcanaught Ironclad is going to be the centerpiece of your army. It's going to be something you will need to protect, but also make sure that it gets its fair shots in. With a very respectable 18 wounds, a 3+ save and 8 bravery, it will, however, only move 10 inches a turn when unwounded. Once this thing starts taking damage, it gets slow real fast, but it does still have the disengage and fly high rule, meaning you can stick up the middle finger to someone who tries to keep it stuck in combat. And it means you can get the hell out of dodge really fast and plonk it on an objective and say, come and get me. Which is something even a greater demon of Khorne might have to reconsider, because the Greater Sky Cannon, just the shell profile alone, which has the same stat line of our frigate, except for the following. Instead of D6 damage, it's a flat 6. Yeah. And instead of D6 attacks for the shrapnel, in the case of the frigate, it's a flat 6. So yeah, no matter what, you're getting your full firepower out of this thing, and it's just going to cause all kinds of horrendous pain and suffering. But you also, in addition to this, get 2 different guns. One being the Great Skyhook, the variation on the Heavy Skyhook, the main difference being that it has a flat 6 damage instead of the D6 that a Skyhook can do, and you have a third gun option, called the Great Volley Cannon. A volley cannon is definitely something used for killing smaller units, or horde type things. With an 18-inch profile, 4 D6 attacks, hits and wounds on 3s and a -1 rend, and 1 damage. Yeah. It's definitely something that will be fantastic against killing hordes, although I personally prefer having the cannons because, well, cannons. Cannons are fun. And in addition to that, the flat damage is just fantastic. Although, if you decide this thing is more designed for shooting down troops and perhaps you use it as a assault transport, as is one of its many functions it can fulfill, then yeah, sure, I can understand taking a great volley cannon. That does make sense. Regardless, you get Ethershot Torpedoes, which are 24-inch range, 4 attacks. They hit on 4s, wound on 3s, -1 rend, and D3 damage. Very, very, very respectable. And of course, you have your Ethershot Carbines. Instead of 4 attacks, you now have 8. And they have the same profile. Hitting and wounding on 3s, -1 rend, and 2 damage a pop. Oh, and of course, you've got your boarding weapons, and when this thing's unwounded, it has 8 of them, as opposed to the 6 that the frigate can have. And its bomb racks are equally fun. As I said, this thing can be used in an assault transport kind of capacity. Instead of 15 models, you can take 25, which is wonderful. That's an entire Arcanaut company of 20 models, which you can cram into the hull and have room for passengers, such as say an engine rigger or an Arcanaut admiral. An admiral would happily sit on an ironclad. But remember, once you reach the 16 or more model mark for this thing, it starts moving at half movement, meaning that already dubious 10-inch move becomes 5, and it won't be able to fly high, and it's got all the previous problems. So yeah, if you decide to use this thing as a troop transport, then just understand it's not going to get anywhere very fast. It has the wonderful navigator and engine rigger who will give it that wonderful healing 1 wounded turn, which is all kinds of ridiculous, and the rerolls to run moves. And you have right here a incredibly solid piece of, well, mobile artillery. So how best do you employ these vessels? Well, really, they're just one is better than the other, which is better than the other. The main thing I would tell you is get yourself maybe 1 or 2 gunstruck gun haulers and make sure that they stay close to the frigate and to the ironclad and use them to take up any wounds that could happen. Make sure you stick some engine masters nearby so that these things can constantly be getting repaired, and also don't overladen them with troops. Personally, I prefer the frigate over the ironclad only because of the speed. I like being able to move around really quickly and get out of dodge, and the frigate does have a decent enough firepower to make most things go uh-oh. However, the ironclad is one hell of a beast, and yeah, if this thing gets any time to shoot down on a particular unit, particularly monsters, as these ships are designed for destroying monsters or anything with multiple wounds, yeah, that's going to be quite a spectacular display of firepower. It's no wonder that Kharadon overlords are rapidly becoming a particularly popular army. You can move your units around relatively quick. These ships are very tough. They can take objectives really quickly. Yeah, they have every reason to be one of the most interesting armies to play right now. I hope you've all enjoyed this little video. I will continue to keep working on the audio quality. I hope it's good. I'm still fiddling with it, and I'm speaking to someone who has a bit more knowledge on this kind of stuff than me. But anyway, thank you all for listening. Please like and subscribe and comment below so the good old YouTube algorithm can notice me and bump this to more people. And feel free to check out the Patreon and Facebook page for updates. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Take care, everyone.